Last week at the market, it was a Wi-Fi issue. This week at the market, a square issue. Probably not their fault, but oh my gosh. Welcome to Cedar Moon Candle Co. I'm Christiane, and I make nature-inspired candles. This past week I was vending at the Oregon AgFest here in Salem, and I didn't know what to expect exactly. I went into it with a little bit of trepidation because I know what AgFest is, and it's geared towards kids and families and getting a chance to, pet the animals and watch sheep shearing and climb on the big tractors and, all of that fun kid stuff and experiential stuff. The two vendors I spoke with before I even applied, one does crocheted plushies, says she does great. And I totally get that. That is a great fit. The other vendor is a youth-led business, and she sells sugar scrubs and other body care products like that, and said that they had done pretty well, even though it's not really their niche, but they had done pretty well. So I thought, I'll go ahead and see what happens. You never know until you're there and you try something out and you make some decisions whether you want to stay another time or say, this was not a good fit. So the market was Saturday and Sunday. Saturday was the long day from 8:30 to 5, really long. And Sunday was from 10 to 5, still, a long-ish market. The weather was gorgeous, which worked in favor of all of the outside activities, which many of them were outside, or at least out in the barn. So perfect weather to be coming to AgFest and exploring everything. But because it was so nice, everybody was outside. We could feel like things were busy-ish around us, but if you stepped to the outside, it was just packed with people. And one of the vendors had said that, the market does really good when it's either really hot outside or it's rainy outside, and that kind of drives people in. So the vendor fee was $200, but across 2 days, that's not too bad. I said I had some reservations about vending at this event, knowing what the event looks like. Let me just read you what they say online about who they are looking for in terms of vendors. So on just their kind of, hey, here's what we're about page, says trade show vendors offer visitors the opportunity to touch, taste, and buy natural and processed ag products, see demonstrations of old and new machinery, and to view the sophisticated technology that helps ensure products go from the farm to the market to the home. But I thought, well, I'll go ahead and take a look at what the requirements are. And so then if you go to their vendor page, this is what it says. Excitement is growing for the upcoming Oregon AgFest. AgFest is expanding its annual trade show event to include more Oregon-made products. Over 100 booths showcasing various family-friendly and agricultural products will fill the inside trade show. Vendors offer visitors a wide variety of products from home decor, plants, clothing, accessories, packaged food, services, household items, agriculture items, and much, much more. As you go through, it says vendors wanted. So they are looking for packaged artisan foods, small and homemade crafts, plant, garden tools, equipment, agricultural related business, children, family friendly, DIY stuff, sales and education material, hobby farmers, and garden enthusiasts. So because this is a Oregon focused, they're looking for small and homemade crafts. That seemed to fit. I even at one point had thought, well, that would be cool because I could go ahead and I could have kind of each of the natural ingredients. So one of my candles is a cedar and moss scented candle. And so I could have a little cedar branch and I could have a little moss in front of that candle. So as kids came by, they could see these kinds of things go into making this candle. Have the berries and the flower, all of that stuff on a simplified level, but have that out so it could be a touch and feel and get to learn things. I am glad I did not do that. That was really not part of what the vendor area looked like. It felt very much like a state fair, and possibly because we were in the building that has the state fair, but we've also been there for the holiday show, which is run by a different group. And this felt completely different. Was it having lots of families and kids there? It could be. The noise level was loud for much of it. There was entertainment that was going on across the building from us, and we could hear them the whole time. Balloons were being blown up. There was a pedal tractor race that was not too far from us. So there was just a lot of noise, plus all the noise that people make when they're in that setting. So it was kind of a hard venue. What we noticed for traffic, it was set up so, there's kind of a big perimeter that goes around the outside and a central lane through it, and then little, it's divided into pods. And what we noticed is a lot of people went straight down the middle of it to either, get to the tractors or head outside to the food or whatever. The outside aisles were a little busier, but still, people were going from where they came in through to someplace else. In those pods, you could see as you walked down the side what people were selling. So in general, if you were on the outside edges, you had a little more visibility. But toward the inside, there were a lot of information-only booths. So there was a college information booth, and there was a Gideon's Bible booth that was there handing out free Bibles. And so because we were the third pod back, if you just have been walking and glancing down those aisles to see if anything catches your attention, and you have only seen information things coming up, you're not going to realize necessarily that the whole pod that I was in was all people selling actual products. I think we were also at a disadvantage, and I know, again, this is something you can't know until you're in the situation and have experienced it, but where we were placed meant that our backs, and we were in the middle of a 4-booth pod, but our backs were toward the main building entrance, which means as people walked through, they never saw us if they did not come down our aisle. Note to self, be sure you know, if at all possible, where traffic is coming from, where it's moving to. The other thing that was hard was there was a lot of, I don't know that they're all MLMs, but next to us we had a knife vendor, across from us we had a oil vendor, and they all had their spiel and their stuff, and that may have been more of what made it feel like a state fair, because when you go into those buildings where everybody's got their spiel and come on, see this, and would you like to know more about this, and so all of that kind of call out stuff, that's not who I am. Don't ever want to be that. So To a little degree, I felt like the advertising for vendors, I hate to say misleading, but I feel a little misled that they were hoping to have my kind of product at a setup like this. So, in talking about our placement, sort of touched on setup a little bit. We were able to set up on Friday anytime from noon until 7. I was there later from like 4:30 to 6:30. If I had wanted to, we could have actually driven into the building and up to the booth. Because we were on the later end of things and I didn't know what the setup inside was, we opted just to cart everything in. And parking lot to inside of building. No major obstacles except for wheeling around big tractor displays on the every pass. But getting set up was not a big deal. My husband helped out. I had made the decision as I was packing up that there would still be a chance there would be some people new to me who were looking for fall candles, love the fall scents or love the holiday scents. And I thought, well, I'll just bring some of what hadn't sold and, put that on a special 3-tier shelf and have that be a clearance section and kind of compress everything a little bit. That didn't work as well as I had hoped, but I thought, we'll try it and see what happens. We ended up the next morning when my daughter and I went in. We went in early to have time to do almost a complete reset on the booth. Even with the people who did come by and maybe talk with us but not purchase, nobody even looked at that tall shelf. And from a distance, because I didn't have the lights that I usually bring for the holiday market, it was dark, and that tower on the table kind of disappeared. It was not doing the booth any favors. So went ahead, took that down, put it in the back, knowing if anyone said, hey, do you have pumpkin candles? I could say, yeah, I do, hang on. But we ended up spreading things out. We moved the room sprays onto their own shelf so they were no longer intermingled, put up our scent signs that we have. That's you'll see the picture, but it's just it's a photo with scent notes overlaying to give you kind of that feel for what the scent is. It was still really slow in the morning. I was convinced there was no way that we were going to make back the booth fee. At least the purchasing traffic picked up a bit through the day, but that wasn't true for all the vendors. So aside from the slow sales and the really noisy environment the whole time, the first crunch issue that we hit was the square would not work. And it's like, it was working fine last week and couldn't get it connected to my phone. I kept trying. It kept saying I can't find the reader, even though they're sitting on top of each other. It was, I had charged it the day before. It went from 1 red dot to 4 green dots. I'm like, yay, okay, charged. I'm not sure what was going on exactly. But when I finally got it talking to the iPad, it said critically low battery. And it's like, but I charged it. What happened? So, we grab out our portable charger and get it plugged in. And after about half an hour, 1 green dot shows up. And it's like, okay, so there is a connectivity issue either, on the plug-in end. It doesn't appear to be on the square end because obviously it's plugged into the charger and is doing fine. And I was really worried because, at that moment, all that we could really do was tap to pay on the phone. Totally not a big deal. Totally not a big deal. But it was one more thing for that morning. The square slowly charged up. We didn't have our first sale for a really long time, so it wasn't a huge deal. But I will need to pay more attention when charging the square now to make sure that it actually really is charging. I'm wondering if that wasn't the issue that happened last week when it kept dropping off the system, off the Wi-Fi, and me thinking it was a Wi-Fi issue when it could have been the square was not charged enough to be connecting correctly. I don't know. I guess we'll find out this next weekend. The bright spots of it, they were few and far between. The people who came up to the booth fell in love with the candles. It happened, but not often, that someone would, walk up to the end, pick up the candle on the end, sniff it, go, set it down and walk on. People would walk by and go, oh, candles, and they'd keep walking. But the people who really stopped and engaged had great conversations with them, and they loved the candles. And so it's one of those, if you like what I'm selling, you're going to engage and buy from me. And if you're not interested, you know, keep going, and that's fine. I'm not for everybody. To have people to talk to about what I do and how things are, how I make them, and all of that stuff, and to watch their enjoyment. So that was a bright spot. I guess there were two with vendors. One was I had enough vendor friends there who were all basically in eyesight of me, that it was much easier to commiserate with them, because I could see that their sales were going about like mine. And we all had shared vending experiences, so we could say, oh yeah, boy, I'd sure rather be at X market than this right now, or sending silly gifts back and forth just to keep ourselves entertained in the really slow times. On Saturday, the last sale that we had was 3 hours before the event closed, and the sale before that had been 2 hours. So, we had 2 sales in 5 hours, and that is just a brutally long time. We did not make our booth fee back on Saturday. We got about halfway there. We did make back booth fee by the end of it. The numbers this is hard. Like I said earlier, it was a $200 vendor fee for it. It was the 2 days, 15 and a half hours of open time, plus the 2 hours on the front and about an hour on the back. We had 7 sales on Saturday. We did not make half of booth fee. And like I said, the last sale of the day we had on Saturday was 3 hours before closing, and the sale before that was 2 hours. So 2 sales in 5 hours, a painfully long day as a vendor. Sunday was better, although I think our first sale wasn't until an hour and a half into the AgFest. So I was convinced by noon that there was no way this would be the first time we had not made back a booth fee. That was going to be really sad, but definitely be able to chalk that up as a learning experience. Instead, we ended up having a whole 10 sales Sunday, so a total of 17 sales, and our gross sales were 230. 1:30, 2 o'clock, somewhere in there on Sunday, that we finally said, made back booth fee. But then, we had kind of a steady set of sales after that. So, but all told, there was no travel distance to worry about. There wasn't an application fee that went with it. But once you take out the discounts and the square fees, which I will say I benefited because the vast majority of my sales were cash. So I didn't have that as well. But you take the sales minus the discounts and the fees and the vendor fee, and I made a whopping $105.41 for 15 and a half hours plus 3. So 18 and a half hours of work. In general, Sunday was better for the vendors. And my friend who sells the crochet plushies had 2 great days and sold out of some things. Felt really horribly. She had said this was such a good thing because she was hoping it would be for all of us. No shade at all to her. You go in and you try something, and I didn't go into it blindly. It's much easier for me to say, not going to do that event this next year. I really want to be in a place where people are focused on supporting small businesses. They're looking for handcrafted goods. They're much more my target audience. It was a long weekend. I am looking forward to the chance this next weekend to hopefully have a little bit different experience. It's so hard when you look and you say, if I had just stayed at the Saturday market like originally I had thought I would. Chances are I would have netted about the same as I did on Sunday. So we would have made roughly the same amount gross income. We would have done it on Saturday in 5 hours instead of the weekend. But since the cost is only $35 a week at the Saturday market, for me, that's a big chunk of change. The difference between covering a $200 fee and covering a $35 fee. This weekend was one to put in the lessons learned file. There is no awesome way to spin my way out of this one. It was rough. Yeah, what I'm taking with me is don't do that event the next time. I am looking forward to this coming Saturday when we are back. The weather's supposed to be good. It's, a 5-hour market. That will seem so short by comparison. And yeah, we'll fill you in on the goings on after that. Take care and see you soon.